Welcome, everybody, to the Assuminati Podcast.
Yeah!
Woo! Uncle Bobby's on it today.
Yeah.
Speaking of Uncle Bobby, I'm Brandon.
I'm Matt.
I
think you missed your cue.
I'm Uncle Bobby.
He's Uncle Bobby. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for watching. We hope you liked the last couple episodes from the Salt Lake City Cemetery. 'Tis October, is it not? We got a little spooky on in. We're going to continue the local spooky theme.
Rocktober.
Love it. So this week, we're keeping the local theme, the local October spooky theme, and we're going to talk about another controversial site. This time, we're heading up north a little bit, up to Matt's neck of the woods.
That's right.
Yeah.
Kaysville, baby.
Kaysville, about 30 miles or 30 minutes north of downtown Salt Lake, about 25 miles. As the crow flies, nestled in the foothills of beautiful Kaysville, Utah. We bring you to a site that has been the magnet of a lot of activity, negative activity, to put it lightly, which will
Paranormal activity.
Paranormal, maybe?
Even that.
Controversial, spooky, sad, you name it. This site has been a magnet for it. It is called Kays Cross.
The legend of Kays Cross.
The legend of Kays Cross. So again, Kaysville, Utah, Kays Cross. So this site has changed over the years. Now, doing the research, it looks like this thing was built in the 1940s, a big cross built out of river rock, field rock, I guess you could say, cemented together.
How big would you say it was?
It was 20 feet tall, Uncle Bobby.
It's pretty big.
By about 13 feet wide. So this was no small feature.
That's
again
impressive.
Huge. Yeah, this nestled though in the middle of a holler, I guess you could say, in the foothills.
A holler.
A holler.
That's right.
So it wasn't exactly.
All you hear now?
Wasn't exactly up on a hill for all to see. So it was kind of hidden away, but yet it's a huge feature. Again, 1940s is when they suspect this thing was created. 1946, from most accounts. 20 by 13. Then, years later, we'll get into some of the reasons we think this thing was erected. We'll get into some of the stories and the controversies related to it. But in 1992, a bunch of crazy kids, Matt.
Could be. You never know.
You need your lawyer present for this next part?
Allegedly.
This thing was blown up. So picture a 20 by 13 cross full of rocks and cement and heavy and huge, and it blew up. They estimate about 80 sticks of dynamite it took to blow this thing up.
No small feat.
No small
That's
feat
impressive.
at all. And many journal entries, as well as reports of people throughout the town heard the blast. So it was a large blast. We'll get into some of the details behind who may have done it, the whodunits, a little bit later. So if you were
in the Relief Society that week,
yikes, I'd say that was the talk of the town for a while,
for sure.
So we'll get into some of the who done it, who did it, who made it, who blew it up. Who's it for? We're going to get into all of that. And why is it still, to this day, a magnet for paranormal activity? Crazy activity? Sad activity? Whatever. As of recent, within the last year, Ghost Adventures on the Discovery Channel did an episode, a big enough deal for them to come all the way into small town Utah to do an episode at Kays Cross. There's that much reported paranormal activity happening here. I watched the episode. I think you've seen it as well, Matt.
I have.
And those guys are interesting. Yeah, and we're not promoting Discovery Channel, but it's worth a watch if you happen to already have it.
I think if you want a high level overview of what Kays Cross is, and you can deal with a little bit of cheesiness, go ahead and watch that.
Yeah, Ghost Adventures, they give you at least a little bit of background on why that place is so creepy. And again, the cross was blown up, so it looks a little different nowadays since the year 1992. And then, of course, they get into their cheese and their antics, I guess you could say. So take that with a grain of salt. But we did a little bit more research, and we have a local, an actual Kaysville son with us. So we're going to get his perspective on what he knew and what he had heard growing up. He was around.
And
Sure.
what he allegedly may or may not have done.
May or
May not have.
May or may not have. Well done.
How old were
Yes.
you in 92?
I would have been 17,
Interesting.
I think.
Nice.
I don't know. Quick math.
I'm going to write that down.
Math.
Yeah.
92, early 90s.
Yeah. Maybe 16.
So we've 16-year-old Matt, and there was an explosion. A little suspicious. May or may not, though.
Where'd you get the
Alleged.
dynamite, Matt?
Alleged.
Could have
Alleged.
Yeah,
Allegedly.
Not sure what the limitations on that is. But Matt, I mean, take us back to the 90s in Kaysville. I mean, what do you remember about this thing? I mean, it had to have been talked about amongst your group of friends or...
Yeah,
amongst
absolutely.
town.
The legendary Kays Cross. Yeah. Growing up, that was one of the Davis County legends. Okay. So we had all sorts of buzz around the Kays Cross when I was growing up. It was devil worship activity going on there. There were spirits crawling around. And when you went down into the hollow and visited the cross, you would see all sorts of paranormal activity down there. You would see teenage groups down there drinking and having a good time. But then when things got really scary was when you were alone or only with one or two of your friends down in the hollow there next to the cross. So those stories were nonstop growing up. Nonstop. You would hear all sorts of things going on in the Kays Cross area. Now, I never actually went to the cross as a teenager. This was all outside speculation, and the legend was so thick that it scared me away. I will say that it did its job. I think that part of those things were perpetuated by the groups that wanted to keep you away, but that's just my speculation. Who knows? But growing up in the 90s, it was definitely a thing. It was one of those things that if you were able to conquer that and go down there with your friends, you had bragging rights. That kind of a thing. And everyone knew about it. It wasn't just one faction of the community or one group, one teenage, section that thought there was anything to this. It was kind of everyone knew. My parents knew, my older siblings knew, the girl that I was dating, now my wife, knew all about it. In fact, that was in her backyard. It was essentially right there down the road. Her parents didn't allow her to go. Similar to my parents. They wanted to kind of keep us pure and clean and away from the devil worship activity that was allegedly happening in Kays Cross. Wow. So those things were there. We heard all about that stuff, never really knowing the history of why the cross was built or anything like that. We just kind of went with the scary stories and stuck with those things.
Wow. That's something. Now,
yeah, and that persists to this day. I have to say the kids that I've got that are in junior high and high school have all heard of Kays Cross and Kays Cross activities. So we can get into that a little bit later on, but those things have persisted since before my time and probably long after my time.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a legend that just keeps on giving. I think I was just going to ask you if your kids were into it but yeah, apparently it's just a legend that continues to get passed along and continues to grow. Now, right. Robert, you grew up in north of there by about an hour. I mean, had you ever heard of Kays Cross?
No,
yes. Huh.
But keep in mind, I grew up in a small Bolivian village without TV.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So in 92, I didn't hear this explosion.
It's a long way to go in a hand cart, so that makes sense. So you didn't hear about the explosion at all?
No, first time I heard of it was when Matt mentioned it.
Yeah, and I grew up in Michigan. However, I spent every summer of my life out here in Utah, and this was new to me as well. So this is great. But the legend is thick. The more research I did, the people in that area go crazy for this thing, good or bad. Like Matt was saying, this is something that they talk about often.
Yeah, I think it is a localized thing, though. I think it's more Davis County. Maybe just Kaysville, in fact. But everyone here, locally knows about the cross, knows what happens down there. And many people stay away from it. They don't want to go down in there and have any of the evil spirit experiences or anything like that. And to some people, it's a draw. It draws people in there that want to experience paranormal activity or do some whatever they want to do down in there. I don't know, but yeah, it's polarizing for sure.
Okay, man. Just right there in small town Kaysville, Utah. Who would have known? Who would have figured? So let's talk about why. Why is this such a magnet? Why does this attract such activity? I mean, major ghost hunting expeditions happen here every year. They pay to come in and they put up all their instruments and see what they can find. Some film TV shows, and I mean, so it's a big deal. People know about it amongst the ghost hunting world. I guess you could say Case Cross is a pretty popular place, like you said, to experience that type of activity. So, who was it built for? Why was it built? I mean, Robert, what do you have, man?
Yeah, so the land there is owned by a polygamous family, the Kingstons.
Famous name.
Yeah, they're known for their many wives, among other things. But there's theories about why. So one of the theories is that one of the polygamous people, and I forgot his name, but I assume he was, one of the Kingstons, but that he had 7 wives. He got sick of them, because who wouldn't get sick of 7 wives? Killed them all, buried them around this cross, buried one of them inside of it standing vertical, and then he hung himself from the cross. Now, that's one of the legends. I couldn't find anything to corroborate that story. But I did find an interview from one of the Kingstons, and he was being asked about, the history of it, and he believes it was built in the summer of 1946.
Okay.
And what he remembered was there was this dude named Krishna Venta, who came around, and so I wanted to know more about this Krishna Venta. So first of all, let's start about learning about him. So he was born in 1911 in San Francisco. His dad was an immigrant from Romania, and his mom was this chick from Utah. He went to school in Elko, Nevada, very glamorous place.
Yeah.
And he was married a couple of times. One of the interesting things about him is his name when he was born was not Krishna Venton. His name was Francis. And then he came to Utah. So this is where our story starts. So the Kingstons apparently were inviting him to come and do some lectures there in the holler of their property, inviting their vast family to hear these lectures. And by this time, Krishna had I think he'd changed his name by this point, and he'd become very interested in Mormonism, but I don't think so much to join the Mormons, but to pattern some of his things after them. Essentially, he ends up creating his own little crazy religion. But theory goes that this cross was built either for or inspired by Krishna Venta. They're on the Kingston property in the holler. Shortly after it was built, though, I don't think it was finished. He moved to California, where he founded the WKFL, stands for Wisdom, Knowledge, Faith, and Love, Fountain of the World. And this was a cult in Simi Valley, California. So, if
Allegedly.
ever you've heard,
Allegedly.
well, he did start it. There's some proof that he started it. Maybe allegedly it was a cult, but it was a group of people, consenting individuals, if you will, and they gave up all their earthly possessions to the group as a whole, and they lived their life happily.
Kind of like the law of consecration. Is that what that?
Very much like that. Yes. Most of the people that joined it were poor, had nothing anyway. I imagine there was some that had some wealth, though, to keep them supported, because they're in Simi Valley. They've got a big mansion. all this stuff. They started their own like monastery. They did do some good things. There was a plane crash once, and they were recognized for offering aid to the people of this plane crash, where most of the people on the plane died. There was other things where they offered shelter for people. They helped feed the homeless. They helped put out wildfires. So they did some good things. But there was some controversy there within the group. In 1958, Krishna came to an end when some guys who were former members of this group came to confront him about him, experiencing their wives. Anyways, they couldn't come to terms. So with dynamite, they killed themselves and Krishna and burnt some other people there. And that's the end of the story. But down the road, anybody heard of Charles Manson? I don't know that Krishna or Charles ever met, but Krishna moved into the mansion for a short time. It said that he may or may not have tried to take over. The people there didn't like him. They kicked him out, and Charles went off his own way, moved into the studio ranch, and that's a whole nother story. But there's some crazy, crazy stuff, and I think more people are probably familiar with Charles Manson. It's a little bit more recent, but a lot of his stuff was inspired by Krishna Venta.
Yeah, just the fact that you can draw some of those parallels between Manson and Venta is fascinating in and of itself, and then tie that back to the local community here is pretty amazing.
Yeah,
Whenever he comes home to Utah, it's kind of like, oh wow, look, we're famous now.
Yeah,
right.
And as far as Venta, Krishna, he did claim to be the second coming.
Jesus
yes.
Christus.
I totally left that out. Like
right.
At one point in 1948, he said, quote, "I may as well say it, I am Christ," end quote.
Right. And I think at his peak, he had about 100 followers that were pretty, into things. I mean, it wasn't just passing, people kind of had to commit and actually follow this guy. So he was pretty believable, pretty charismatic, similar to Manson.
And I have to backtrack. I gave some false information.
Yeah,
he was not known as Krishna Venta when he was in Utah.
Okay.
True.
He didn't change his name till he got to California. So he was still Francis when this cross was built.
And we have military records to prove that. So
Sure.
he was in fact here. He was local. He joined the army. He as a objective conscientious.
Yeah, how do you join the army as a
it's to avoid
that.
It's to I mean, this was during World War II. It was to avoid going overseas in the draft. You would join the army and then say it's against my religion.
Yeah, for religious reasons, I can't do this.
So yeah, there's proof he was in fact in Utah. There's records to prove it.
Right,
man. And then the connection to Manson, his group, I found interesting, saw the craziness within Manson and kicked him out. So I thought, okay, even though he does,
I think they were legit in a lot of ways.
He claims to be the second coming. He claims all of the spaceship stuff. Okay, he's saying some crazy things, but he wasn't. It didn't appear to be violent. Maybe some violations, but nothing violent. But Manson took a lot of his teachings, a lot of his quotes with him into his new group, and then created that whole helter-skelter mindset, a little bit more violent than what this guy was doing.
Now, obviously, this got thwarted because he kept sleeping with other people's wives.
Yeah, that doesn't help.
So,
That'll do it.
That'll get you blown up.
Yeah, just don't do it.
So, yeah, I mean, he was blown up, which is kind of ironic. The cross itself was blown up in the same manner. I wonder if there was any connection there, which we haven't talked about yet as far as the destruction of this cross. So he obviously has some Utah connections, some local connections. He obviously imprinted himself upon the local population in Kaysville, at least upon the people who invited him there. Mm-hmm. And so I believe that's one of the theories, is this cross was erected in his honor, correct?
Yeah, I think that's one of several theories, but yeah, I think so.
So this cross, again, could have been in tribute to Krishna Venta. What were some of the other theories of why this cross was created?
Well, so some of the things that I've heard, one specifically is that it was created just to celebrate the family Kingston.
Okay.
You know, there was a giant K on the cross. I think you mentioned that earlier, Brandon, but
This is it.
maybe you didn't. Okay,
Yeah, this is the
so
first
there
time.
was a K on the side of the cross that was pretty predominantly printed on there somehow, or a part built in as part of the cross. And you know, it could have stood for Krishna. Could have stood for K, just Kay, the founder of Kaysville. It could have stood for any number of things. You know, it could have been, you know, Kingston, K for Kingston. You know, who knows?
Wow. And this was built upon the Kingston's land. They were FLDS, or the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. Because
Right.
the Latter-day Saints do not use a cross. That's not part of their imagery. However, the fundamentalists or any other groups that they had been tied to at the time may have. And so a cross wasn't completely out of the picture for maybe their own family, the Kingstons, like you mentioned. That's definitely not out of the picture here.
Right.
Or it was in tribute to Krishna or K. Okay, so there's several theories here as far as why it was created or who it was meant to pay tribute to. Wow. So who blew it up and why?
Yeah, Matt, who blew it up?
I wouldn't know.
Ah.
I have no idea. There are several
you were in
working
the town
theories.
at the time.
I was definitely a resident of the county, and I was
Fact
in the
one.
teenage, right?
A teenage resident of
You were a teenager, fact two.
But one giant working theory goes against that, Robert, and it's that I don't have any explosives expertise. So
Allegedly.
allegedly,
I've seen you
that's true.
blow up some things.
Have you?
In fact, I've been
Just
outside
bathrooms.
the room. Yeah.
Yeah, just bathrooms. Just bathrooms and maybe some pods at work. Allegedly, I didn't have anything to do with it, but whoever did used enough explosives to break through solid rock and leave that thing in a pile of rubble. And from what I've heard, investigators are puzzled that whoever did that knew exactly what they were doing, and they couldn't pin it on just a local teenage group or, you know, somebody planting one pipe bomb or something in there.
Well,
But
where
they
do you get
used
that much
enough
dynamite.
to know that they were, you know, what they were doing. So some people claim that it was the family that was tired of people coming down into the hollow and visiting the cross, and doing whatever they did down in there, you know, whatever rituals they were trying to do, and they were tired of that and they just blew it up themselves. Some people claim that it was the exact opposite, that it was groups that were tired of the family being in town and wanted to blow up the cross to send a message. So I've heard a lot of different theories as to what the reason was or what group was responsible, but to this day they have not solved that case. They're still not certain who created that mess and blew up the cross.
Now, if you want to know more about the Haunted K's Cross, up close and personal, it is fully monetized and you can take tours.
That's true.
Yeah. So I'm thinking we may need to take a field trip potentially. But they're open every night this week. On Saturday, they're doing a zombie airsoft challenge at Case Cross. So
A zombie airsoft.
yeah, I always love it when a good enterprising entrepreneur sees a way to make some money. Very exciting.
Might as well, right? People are sneaking onto the property anyway. Might as well monetize it.
Might as well capitalize.
Do it. Because zombie airsoft, I mean, so we might as well talk about why people still go to it today.
So people have taken their lives there. All sorts of kind of creepy things have happened. And whenever there's something like that happens, there's always going to be a group of people that feel like that area is haunted or there's paranormal activity there because of it. And so I think that's what still creates the draw or the mystique of this place to this day.
Yeah, you see satanic rituals happen there often. They consistently find bags of like feathers and bones, things that are
Right.
related to satanic rituals. There's an old well down there, and
Right.
some kids or maybe just a satanic group have painted satanic symbols upon the well.
Mhm. Saw a
The
video of
multiple
a guy
suicides. Yeah.
says he went and laid on it. He derobed, which meant he took his shirt off and he laid on it, and he claims it burned a cross onto his back.
Yeah.
Wow. And then you have some of the locals that live right there. I mean, they claim to get that feeling. They won't let their kids go down there. It sounds kind of like how you grew up, Matt. I mean,
Yeah, and my wife is one of those people. She currently has a rule against going down into the Kays Cross area for any of our kids, because she believes that there's a bad feeling down there. There's some bad spirits, that kind of a thing. And why be around it really if there's no uplifting feeling that you get by being there? So that's kind of the feeling that she's got.
Yeah.
and then you just never know who's down there physically. Like there could be somebody trying something. I mean, there's been multiple suicides, like you mentioned, some super sad
Right.
or satanic related things have happened down there. You just don't know who you're going to come up against, who you're going to run
Yeah.
into, what their intentions are. And so I'd say it's a pretty good rule. I had zero desire to go there myself after watching a lot of these ghost adventures or documentaries on it. I'd probably go for a hayride, though. That'd be kind of
How about
fun
an airsoft
with a big
game?
group. Maybe shoot a zombie with an airsoft gun. That'd be kind of fun. So, and maybe it's a case of you see what you want to see, you feel what you want to feel, you invite what you want to invite. So
Well,
again,
and
I'm
if
skeptical of a lot of this stuff. But again, when you invite those types of feelings into that area, that
Well,
that
and
could
I
be a
think they
little
want
different.
it too.
Yeah.
And so if you go down there looking for it, and maybe you're under the influence of, some psychedelic mushrooms or the ones from Harmon's.
No, you're right,
Drink it
Robert. Maybe you're under the influence. Maybe you go down there with the intent to summon those types of feelings or demons. I believe it can happen if you
Well,
put enough
don't you
work into it.
remember, don't you remember when you were a kid and you kind of wanted to feel some stuff like that, just to kind of feel it? So,
To
for
feel
example,
alive.
my friend and I, back in early high school, maybe end of junior high, I
In
can't remember. It's so
1992.
long ago. But Jeff Haslam, if you're listening out there, Jeff, shout out to Jeff.
Jeff.
But in his basement, we would spin backwards records to try and hear the backmasking and obviously bring in whatever feelings we could get, and we you hear what you want to hear, right? So we had been prepped before that to know that, listening to Revolution 9 on the White Album backwards would say a certain thing. And sure enough, that's what we heard. So I think there's some of that happens. I think you go into that situation feeling like this is a haunted hollow and we're going to feel something down in here. And if you tell yourself that, you're going to do it. It's mind over matter, right?
So there's a lot of secretive groups involved in that area, and then the fact that it was blown up, he was blown up. Manson was involved, not in this, but just tied to the group. I mean, when you throw him into anything, it gets creepier. So there's all of this builds up, and then you have the local legends passed down from Matt's parents to him to his kids. This generational creepy vibe that just goes throughout. And now you have people nowadays doing rituals, unfortunate suicides, bringing additional negative energy to that area.
And people shooting
Just
zombies with their sauce.
And then you monetize it.
Now you can go get a hayride and a hot chocolate.
Hayride, hot
Yeah.
chocolate, and shoot a zombie in
it.
the face with an airsoft. Yeah,
That's
It
right.
sounds like good, wholesome fun.
that's good stuff.
That's how we roll in Kaysville.
So a lot of unsolved mysteries here. Who blew it up? Who created it? Who is it created for? All of that seems to be up for debate. So that's kind of
Nobody knows.
an unsolved mystery here in the local town of Kaysville, Utah.
And just another local legend that we're covering during the month of October.
Love it. Covered by national TV shows all the way down to local bloggers. And we
Now
love
this podcast.
And now the most important podcast in the world.
The Assuminati Podcast.
Assuminati
Thank you.
Podcast.
Thank you. So today, friends, we learned about a guy named Krishna Venta, Charles Manson, a big cross with a K on it, There was dynamite in 2 different parts of this story. And so it was quite enlightening. Hot chocolate, hay rides. This was a fantastic story about the legend of the haunted Kays Cross in Kaysville, Utah. So if you liked what you heard, like, subscribe, leave some comments. I enjoy the crazy comments every once in a while. And come back next week. The end.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Woo! Join us at Assuminati.com as well.
Yeah, that too.
Like and subscribe and share with your friends.
Mm-hmm. Talk to them at the virtual water cooler.
I love it.
The virtual water cooler.
Okay, we ready?
Let's do it.
Go Sparty. Rivalry week. Okay.
Oh yeah,
Clean off
that's
the
right.
screen.
It's too bad. Too bad Michigan's gonna wipe the walls with them.
Hey. But, okay, maybe you're right.
Well, we'll see.
What? What are you doing? Yeah.
I'm doing the Brandon start thing.
Hold it. Hold.
Wax on, wax off.
You.
And that's how Earth came to be.
So they were experiencing global warming.
Mm-hmm.
Some rich folks got together and thought that they should create a space race
Take a rocket
and
ship.
start launching people into space
Mm-hmm.
for intergalactic planetary travel
Yep.
to discover and maybe colonize another world.
You're onto it, man.
Yeah.
Onto it.
History
I
might be
wonder if
repeating
that would ever
itself.
happen.
Daddy
Huh.
Elon is going to take us
Oh.
there. Conscientious objector. Is that the
Yeah, in his
Keep
history,
trying. Keep trying. Conscientious.
I can't say that word. It's my tongue. It's my tongue.
It's a tongue twister.
It is a tongue.
Yeah. Conscientious.
You say it. You say it. You turn back.
Conscientious. Oh man, conscientious. Wow.
All right, people at home, you try it as well.
Conscientious objective.
Wow.
no,
That's tough.
You know, whichever.
Dr. Pepper. Yeah.
You know, it might welcome you having
Diet.
some of the feelings. Yeah.
This episode brought to you
by Diet Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Pepper.
That's right.
Kill me.
Conscientious observer. Yep, can't say.
Conscientious objector.
There we go.
Go.
Conscientious.
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 That's right.
It's like
Objector.
Worcestershire sauce. Conscientious observer.
Or as Guy Fieri says, "Where's your sister sauce?"